Thank you, Professor Jeffrey Kenney, for the speech just now. Next, we would like to invite Dr. Azhar Ibrahim, the next speaker. Dr. Azhar Ibrahim is the Deputy Head of Department at the Department of Malay Studies, National University of Singapore. He graduated with a Doctor of Philosophy and Master's degree from the same university, specializing in Malay Studies, especially in the field of classical and modern Malay literature. His focus is on sociology of literature, social theology, cultural discourse, civilization and Islamic thought, as well as interest in critical literary discourse and Malay-Indonesian intellectual development. He has also published Syair Kesaksian entitled The Theme of Social Criticism. Among his published books are Historical Imagination and Cultural Responses to Colonialism and Nationalism, a Critical Malaysian Perspective in 2017. Menyanggah belenggu kerancuan fikiran masa kini in 2016, Utopia Masyarakat Lambak 2015, Cendekiawan Melayu Penyuluh Emansipasi 2014, Bahasa dan Tantangan Intelektualisme 2014, Contemporary Islamic Discourse in the Malay-Indonesia World in 2014, and also Narrating Presence, Awakening from Cultural Amnesia in 2014. So I would like to invite Dr. Azhar to take on the podium.
Thank you, Saudari. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Foremost, to Dr. Farouk, thank you once again for inviting me. I'm very honored. In fact, many of my friends said, kenapa ya Dr. Farouk selalu undang anda? It's a privilege, and indeed also it's a responsibility. 2 days we are in this hotel, and we went through, especially our two professors, we went through a very thorough a workshop, a lecture series, yeah, and exchanges of ideas. And I'm glad I'm part of that too. 10 years ago, when the IRF was launched, and Professor Tariq Ramadan was here, I was one of the member from Singapore delegation, the activists called Reading Group. At that time, I was teaching at the, of course at NUS, but I was still like playing around with the activists, yeah. And so, and then I don't know, from then onwards, I saw that, hey, this is something like what my department is doing. I come from Department of Malay Studies. As you may know, the department was set up by Professor Hussein Alatas in 1967. Of course, our Malay Studies have been around since Zabah in 1955 at Bukit Timah campus. So I'm trained in that, and since then, when I see activities done by RRF, it's actually part and parcel of my academic training too. So when I was invited for this series called Pemikiran Reformis, for the first, since the first one, I think many years ago, yeah, Dr. Farouk, the first one was on Hamka, yeah. It was with Buya Shafi Ahmad Marif, and since then, I've been invited, and it's a kind of like rereading my own materials, yeah, from my undergraduate days to my postgraduate days, and of course my reading differ from time to time, because it's also a learning journey, and I'm glad also to be given the chance to interact with Malaysian friends. Most of my activities were from before knowing IRF, with the Dewan Bahasa Pustaka and University of Malaya Pengajian Melayu. So that kind of world is totally different. We are doing literature, the kind of things in Malay studies doing, yeah. But I'm glad there's one area of Muslim thought, Islamic thought, especially covering Nusantara, which I see a very great gap, yeah, especially on dealing with Islam in the Nusantara or the Southeast Asian region. This is where something, an area that I specialize, And I'm very glad that given the chance that I'm able to, at least, I think for 1 year, we have like 3 to 4 conferences on civil pemikir reformists. And what I've noted is that the young audience, the Malaysian audience, are really eager to know more, right? There's something that they feel missing. Maybe they feel missing maybe in their university syllabus, and they need to find out something out there, outside campus. Of course, we know young students run reading circles and so on. But when IRF launched the Siri Pemikir Reformists, I think the student benefit a lot, apart from, of course, you know, friends of Dr. Farouk. And I noted that the exchanges are real, and the student, normally after the lecture series, they will pick up the book and they'll start discussing it. And in fact, some of them will email me, even WhatsApp me, and wanting to know more. And I'm glad, as a teacher, I'm glad that especially students picking up on this. Of course, when we talk about the project of reform here in this part world called pembaharuan, there are many challenges. I'm not going to giving a lecture on this. It's impossible. I lost my voice. I mean, this is my 5th lecture in 1 week in Kuala Lumpur alone. Not that I'm tired. I'm not tired of IRF. But I think we have reform fatigue discussing. Yeah. So I don't know what else to take out from my brain to talk about this, except 2 points, I think. One, the real thing is that we have young ones willing to read, but they have no access of material. So I thought today the book launching, the series of compilation of articles from the previous, all those series of seminars compiled into 1 volume, and I'm sure other volumes coming up. These are actually one of the possible avenue for the student to pick up. Just hope that, you know, the price is affordable. I'm thinking about the student audience here. They are very serious, they want to read, and we need to give access to them. And of course, I think there are many other works which calls for a reprint or translation. And I think this must be done. If there are nobody out there interested, I think, and if there are, you know, wealthy businessmen or, you know, wealthy administrators wanting to infaq, or I think best is to IRF, and therefore they can do the publication series. Because this is because I run also reading circles in Kuala Lumpur. Many young ones don't have reading materials. They want to know more, but they don't have it, right? Especially those covering from this region. Yeah, I can do easily a survey. If you can go to any leading bookstores, even in Kuala Lumpur, it's very hard to find works of the kind of reformistic outlook, right? That's number one. Number two, I think important when we talk about reform, it's not about biography of ideas and biography of personalities. I think, I mean, I'm part of that reformist series. I keep on harping the importance of course, we need to recognize those personalities that have contributed, but we need a new language in this reform discourse. What is this new language? We need to incorporate critical perspective from social sciences and critical humanities into the discourse of reform. Otherwise, because we are, I'm part of this process, you know, I may not be wanting to be called a reformist, of course, but I'm part of the discourse, like it or not, because Malay studies is one of the central discourse in Malay society, be it Malaysia, Indonesia, or Brunei. We need a new language, and that language is a language of critique, yeah, which means 2 parts to it: an enunciation, which we calls for good things, and denunciation, which a critique, yeah, a diagnosis with the end aim of reconstruction, right? And of course, the language of hope. And the language of hope means persistency in our discourse. Because at many times, there were pockets of reform group, right? But no stamina. We look in history. Yeah, Al-Imam in Singapore only survived less than 5 years. They started Madrasah Iqbal 1905. The school itself lasted only 2 years. And the journals, yeah? And of course, they need to run away from Singapore. They run away to Malacca and then eventually to Penang. That's the story of our reform movement, right? And then later on, the traditionalists beefed up by the formation of Majlis Agama, all right? Targeting against the reformists, labeling them called kaum muda. And then by the post-independent period, by the 70s, the rise of Dakwah revivalism, also attacking on the revivalists, the reformist group. And by the 90s, political Islamism or cultural Islamism coming in full force. And reformism actually no longer part of the Muslim imagination. This is what I can say in the Malay discourse. Yeah? And the presence of IRF, this is the 10th anniversary. I think this is a commendable, sustainable reform grouping. Yeah? When we hope in maybe 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, IRF still can maintain the endeavor, the struggle, and the determination to contribute at least in the Malay-Indonesian discourse on reform. Yeah? I like this ambience, this is very nice. Yeah? The room is beautiful. More so, behind me is Christmas tree. Yeah? If you say, it's wonderful. Imagine somebody take a photo and then put it in the social media. Here we have Islamic Renaissance Front talking about Muslim reformism with a Christmas tree behind me. On that note, thank you so much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.